in there in that last meeting. So that was great. Any comments? Not hearing any. And do speak up in case I can't quite see everybody on the screen.
Uh,
Okay, hearing. Oh,
hey,
go ahead,
Robert.
Fritz. Yeah.
I just noticed for the introduction of late items, I have a late item because
Oh.
I've been can I say that now? I've been appointed to the OCP steering committee,
Hmm.
and Danielle is probably aware of the situation that it's you really have to dedicate to that, and it's going to take me a lot of time. It's very interesting, but I don't think there's much. I want to resign from the Housing Advisory Committee. Also, if you think about the linkages to the OCP steering committee, it's Danielle, it's Allison, and most of the time Tim Wake as well. So you know what I mean? There's a good
Okay.
connect. So I think I'll just do that over the weekend. I write a little note to council that I'm very happy to be on the steering committee and that there's so much a person can do. Only
Yeah.
Danielle can do more.
Oh, well, thank you, Fritz. Thanks for letting us know. And I'm certainly sad to see you go because it's been wonderful being on this committee with you, but I completely understand. And I'm also very pleased that you're on the OCP committee. I think you'll be a great addition there. So thank you. I don't know, Steph, where that should fit in on the agenda. So you can put that in the minutes wherever it's supposed to go.
Okay.
Okay, no problem. Thanks,
Okay.
Fritz.
I'm going to
Thanks.
leave in an hour because I have a meeting at a quarter to 11.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Fritz.
All right.
Okay. So anything from the minutes before we move along? Any comments, questions? Feel like Greg's maybe trying to say something. Oh, no, he's turning his video off. Okay, there we go. Okay, so hearing none, we'll hearing no objections, we'll unanimously agree the minute adoption of the minutes. Okay. Public comments. Steph, is there anybody for public comments? No. Just looking
No
quickly at
public
the.
comments.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move along. So the next one is 4.1.
Can't
This
hear
is
anything here.
Daniel, affordable housing policy review.
Great, thanks, Robin. So this is what we talked about last meeting. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right thing. So I won't go into as much detail as last time in some of the stuff, but this is about our Housing Accelerator Fund initiative, which is to amend our housing policy to include a provision to waive public hearings for affordable housing projects that conform to Bowen's official community plan. So last meeting, I shared this wonderful graphic showing the effects of recent provincial legislation in terms of prohibiting public hearings and where public hearings may still be considered. So what our policy would look at. We looked at our affordable housing policy and its definition. And then just in the agenda today, I have a track changes version of our current affordable housing policy and just this suggested language at the end of it. So it's to support development of affordable housing, Bowen Island Municipality will consider waiving public hearings for rezoning applications for projects that conform to the official community plan where, and then these are the two numbers that I've put in. So affordable housing makes up 25% of the total gross floor area of the project and, maybe and or, in projects where less than 50% of the gross floor area of the project is residential, where affordable housing projects make up 50% of the total residential gross floor area of the project. So that's what I'd suggest, just what we talked about, just saying there's some level of affordable housing in the project. We would consider waiving a public hearing to help assist the development application process and just what those thresholds would be. So what I put here is if it's a quarter of the overall building size or development size is affordable housing, then that would qualify. Or if half of the residential area is affordable housing, or half of the total residential is affordable housing, then that would as well be eligible to waive the public hearing for projects that conform to the official community plan.
Daniel, can I ask?
Yeah.
We've been talking a lot about just the notion of cash in lieu, and
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that would fit in here, and it just isn't articulated.
I guess it would be like, or where cash in lieu is provided, equivalent to,
Isn't
number
there a
one and number
provision?
two.
Isn't there a provision for cash in lieu already in the policy, Daniel?
There is a provision for cash in lieu in the policy. But I guess does the policy then explicitly say like that is equivalent to these things?
So we're
Or make
talking
an
about
equivalent,
waiving,
yeah.
yeah,
The
waiving public hearings,
15%
right?
make an
Yeah.
equivalent financial contribution to the housing reserve fund.
Well, if this is just about waiving public hearings, then
Yeah.
it's addressed elsewhere. So sorry, we can move on.
That's a good. I was just trying to think about it. Like if somebody said, "Okay, I'm going to make a financial contribution equal to 25% of the gross floor of the project for affordable housing," is that something that the committee thinks like then we should treat that the same as providing affordable housing for 25% of the project, where we could waive a public hearing?
I think it's great because I see that money going to the housing authority to build housing, and there's a bit more control over the housing that's built.
Yeah. Robin?
Yeah, thank you. So I was looking for the little raise hand thing. So I guess could you maybe just quickly articulate what are the advantages of waiving a public hearing? Like for people, I haven't been through many rezoning processes in detail, and probably others who might be listening haven't either. Like how big a concession is this? How big advantage is this waiving of a public hearing?
Yeah, I mean, from our process point of view, I mean, it means like a month or two less time. Like even best case scenario, it probably means like a 2-month faster processing time. It means maybe like, so instead we advertise first reading of a bylaw instead of advertising a public hearing. So then it can be viewed as then, well, maybe it makes for a less contentious process as well. I'm not sure about that. Like, I think Fritz probably has examples of his life as an applicant. I'd say from like my point of view, yeah, it's the sort of, it speeds you up a couple months in the process and presumably provides the applicant a little more certainty of it going forward.
It's the word consider in it that takes away, I think. because everybody reads that differently. If you want to give clarity, you just take that word out.
I know. I think the issue is that we can't, in terms of Local Government Act. It's like council has to consider it.
Okay.
Has to consider waiving. So if we had a policy that's like, well, we won't even consider holding it, we just won't hold it. It's like, well, we're not then considering it.
Okay.
Is that considering that as waiving all hearings as a policy or on each application on a case-by-case basis?
It would be each application. So like an application would come in and would say, oh, it conforms to the OCP and it meets this policy. So we're not gonna, like, council or staff would be proposing then that we don't hold a public hearing.
Okay.
So like we've done that in some rezonings recently. We're not holding public hearings, and staff essentially brings a report and is like, we're not going to hold it. We're going to come to first reading and do the advertising. And then council could say, no, actually, we don't agree with that. We want to hold a public hearing. We think this is a change. Now, the difference is now, like, some things we can't hold public hearings. And then in that case, we would be just telling council, like, this is the process.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I see Allison has a hand up.
And Ron did as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to be 100% clear on this, Daniel. So as I understand it, then what's suggested is that on a case-by-case basis, the council would have the authority to waive the public hearing. But presumably,
yeah, I think probably, yeah, one step maybe stronger than that. Like currently without a policy, council would have the option to waive the public hearing, but this would set out like policy guidance to be clear when we would do it. I guess it leaves it open for council to say, well, I know our policy says this, but you know, this is a 20,000 square foot development and there's 2 tiny housing units and one of them's affordable. So we think this is actually still significant.
Sure.
So we're going to, you know,
and
not
on the
use
other
our
hand,
policy.
if council knew that this that the community was divided on this, it could go ahead and hold the public hearing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just confused about the new provincial legislation, which I thought prevented us from holding public hearings.
Right, so that is this one. So we are prevented from holding public hearings where the whole development is residential, or where at least half
Oh, it's
of
only the
development.
whole,
Yeah.
okay,
So this is about projects that are clearly that would have to be mixed use by definition, but have some residential component that's less than half of the
okay,
development.
okay, because that's not clear with the policy, the suggested language.
Right.
Um, so we can only consider waiving public hearings where it's mixed use.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we can't have a public hearing, period.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm reading somewhere else too, where people or some municipalities are even saying at first reading, there will be no public comments entertained with respect to the development, because that's almost like a public hearing.
I know I've seen some councils do that,
Yeah, yeah,
which seems to like we haven't had a review, but seems to me like fairly, I don't know,
yeah.
like a
Anyhow,
very conservative reading, I guess, is
so how do we support development of affordable housing in mixed use rezonings or mixed use buildings?
I think it could be added right towards the end. So where it says, consider waiving public hearings for rezoning applications for mixed use projects.
Mm.
I think that maybe that would help clarify. That'd be an easy change.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the floor area, I mean, could be applicable if it was 100% residential.
Yes, we just wouldn't be able to hold a public hearing. So there's nothing for council to consider in those cases, because it's just like, well, we don't hold one.
Yeah. So where
okay.
were you suggesting adding on the end of the first paragraph, Robin?
Yeah, before the word projects, after rezoning applications for mixed use projects.
In both 1 and 2.
I was
hang
thinking
on
the
there.
preamble.
In the preamble.
I found the word projects. So for mixed use projects, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Got
I
you
think
right
that
in
would
the first
clarify it.
paragraph.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, Greg has his hand up there.
I'm in the car, so I apologize. Can you hear me? I don't know whether my system is such that you can hear me.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Daniel, does provincial legislation speak to the development of bare land stratas or just land development, not a housing development as such?
I think if it was a bare land strata that was for residential, that would still apply. It would still be like we wouldn't be able to hold a public hearing for a residential bare land strata development. And if it was a mixed use bare land strata, we'd be looking at the floor area of residential and commercial.
Okay.
Or residential and other.
Thank you.
So then the report that I had just had this recommendation in, so I would be bringing something to council. So it's the committee recommend council adopt amendments to the affordable housing policy to waive public hearings for affordable housing projects to fulfill requirements of Initiative 3 and Bowen Island's Housing Accelerator Fund action plan.
So I think my only suggestion would be, again, to maybe add that mixed use. So, just where you were, Daniel. So for
sorry,
mixed use
awesome.
housing projects or something like that. Maybe, again, just for that extra bit of clarification.
Yeah, I can add that. My screen's all just gone black. So.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so wherever it fits in that paragraph. But yeah, that would be my only suggestion based on the discussion here. But so is that a resolution you'd like us to
Yes,
vote
please.
on and pass up? Yeah, okay. So any further discussion? Greg, you still got your hand up, but I'm guessing that's just yeah, that's okay. Any other discussion or comments? Nope, I don't hear any. No. Okay, great. So do we need to move it, right? So we move that, and I don't have it in front of me, so
Sorry, I don't have it in front of me either.
Sorry,
that's
I'm
okay.
just
Maybe,
trying to,
yeah, Daniel can maybe read it out because he's got it in front of him.
yeah, let me put it in the chat.
Oh, okay, great.
That the Housing Advisory Committee recommend Council adopt amendments to the Affordable Housing Policy 0804 to waive public hearings for, and I put for mixed-use projects with affordable housing components to fulfill requirements of Initiative Number 3 in Bowen Island Municipalities Housing Accelerator Fund Action Plan.
I'll move that.
Okay, thank you. All second. All in favor? Yeah, that's unanimous. Oh, I can't, Lois, I can't see you. So I'm sort of assuming because you're not speaking
I'm
up.
here. I'm
Good,
here.
okay.
I'm just on the ferry. Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks.
perfect. Yeah. So do speak up if you're a nay at any point.
Yeah,
So great.
Thanks. Thanks.
That sounds like it's unanimous. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did we get any landing, sorry, on the cash in lieu? Is that, are you
I
clear
was
on
going to add that, yes, as a third piece.
for my
um,
notes? Okay.
yeah.
Thanks.
And I
should
like the fact, just to speak to that, like I like the idea that it's still at council's discretion. So if it is a project, say with cash in lieu, council can still decide, no, we think this needs to go to public hearing. And then also for clarity, and Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, for anybody who might be watching or listening, there still is opportunity for the public to comment. It doesn't mean that the public's totally cut out, right? There's all the other
Yes,
traditional
correct.
ways that the public can provide comments. They can come to meetings, they can write letters. So it's not that this is cutting out access to the public to comment on projects. Is just simply sort of a procedural step that's being streamlined. So just so that's clarified. Okay, great. Well, that's fantastic, Daniel. Another tick in the box on the Housing Accelerator Fund plan. So that's great. Yep. Okay, so moving on to 5.1 subcommittee reports. So 5.1 is the community-owned housing organization working group. So between our meetings, council, I guess approved is the right word, adding this to our working plan.
They directed the committee.
Thank you. So they directed the committee to create this working group. I've had a few calls offline with various people. And so I think, yes, as we discussed before, it'll be Councillor Tim Wake, myself, Robin Fenton, and it'll be Ron as well, Ron Chalmers. And then I think if I'd like to keep it small and nimble, and we'll definitely be reaching out to the group and out to people outside of the committee as well to get expertise and comment. And so that's, I don't know if we need anything procedural, Steph, to establish or...
The committee would vote, say that that the Housing Advisory Committee strike the following, a subcommittee to explore community-owned housing organization comprising the following members.
Okay, so what Steph just said, that we strike a committee comprised of Tim Wake, Robin Fenton, Ron Chalmers. Do we have somebody to move that? Oh, thank you, Nigel. Second. Thank you, Greg.
Can I ask a question? The council resolution comprising both HAC members and non-HAC members. So are we going to have a discussion afterwards about recommendations for the non-HAC members?
That would be a closed meeting, Councillor. We wouldn't discuss that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So
You can. I'm discussing types of stakeholder groups should be represented. Would be appropriate.
Okay. So yeah, so then maybe should we vote on creating it, and then we can have a short discussion on what kind of different stakeholders should be advised? I think that's a great idea. Okay. So all in favor of striking this committee?
Aye.
Yeah. Okay. Everybody's yes. Okay. And I didn't see anybody, but I'm hearing no nays. So I'm going to assume people that didn't put their hands up or say anything that were ayes. And I think it's passed. Okay. Thanks, Steph. Okay, so we can, open discussion. Did you want to, Councillor Morse, did you want to provide feedback on who you think should be part of the stakeholders that should be included?
As Steph said, that we can't necessarily name names or anything. Just one thing, I just wanted to make it clear that the council resolution, the wording is explore establishing a community-owned housing organization. So
Okay.
it's not assuming that a community housing organization will be established. It's exploring whether or not to establish.
Yeah, and I know. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and then I think there's some people on the island who have a lot of experience in the construction of and getting affordable housing built. So I'll send you that name. And I don't know whether we should include somebody from the housing or from the Economic Development Committee, just because, you know, housing for workers, and they've done those surveys or not. But
yeah, we can certainly reach out to the chair.
Or a large employer that has problems with, you know, housing for their staff or something, that, so, you know, somebody who's actually experiencing missing affordable housing. And then I just guess the other question is what's the definition of a community-owned housing organization, which I assume would be part of because there's already, you know, legislation and examples around a housing corporation.
Okay, those are great ideas. And I know I've had a few different conversations with folks in this committee over the last couple of weeks. And I know I had been thinking similarly to Allison that that at the beginning that this would be more exploratory and sort of like looking at different options. But then I was reminded, and then when I looked back at what was sent to council and then what was actually also presented at the committee of the whole in September, that it seems to me the directive from council is exploring the community-owned housing organization. So I think it's looking at what it would look like if one of those was formed. So, I mean, I think there has been research done into other options, and I think we'll plan to mention that in the report just as background. I think that's important, and that work's been done. But I think that the working group's focus will likely be on, you know, if a community housing organization was formed, what would it look like? What would the implications be? Those kinds of things. So I think that feels like the direction that this will be heading in. But I think it's important to talk to some of these different stakeholders potentially and see their input, but it might be a little bit more on the practicalities of it in terms of the legalities, the budget, you know, where would funding come from? How would it work? Who would it respond to? Be responsible for those kinds of things. So, and there's some great examples, like Tofino has had some success lately as partnering. And then also, I think it was Tim, the city of Burnaby has just recently formed one, although at different circumstances, because I think they've got quite a big pot of money to work with, but there's some recent examples of them being established. So I think that'll be helpful to look at those moving forward. So I think is there any other comments and thoughts on this working group and maybe what we should tackle or what we should be looking into?
Well, again, my understanding and the reason I voted for the resolution at council was because it had the words explore, establishing, which to me means why should you establish, and laying all that out as well. Not just here's the options, but answering that why question.
Yeah, and I think
yeah.
Yeah, and I think that will be covered. I think we can cover that in the report that we'll eventually produce. Okay, seeing no other thoughts, the next item that I had before we move on from this one was in our conversations, we realized that one of the very important items for this, exploring this group, will be to get some legal advice. And so, you know, on the structure and how that would impact the municipality, how they might be connected or not. And so we would like to propose a resolution and sorry, I did have some wording here. Let me find it. A resolution, and maybe you can help me here, Steph, with how to word it, but to ask the municipality to authorize legal costs of up to a maximum of $2,000 plus taxes, so that the working group can get legal advice and incorporate that into our report. We've spoken to, or I think somebody's been in touch with a particular lawyer who has experience in this area. We're confident it will be less than that. I don't think it will be that much money, but we just want to leave ourselves a little bit of leeway in case we might need to speak to that lawyer a couple of times. Does anybody have any questions or clarifications?
Are we jumping the gun a little bit on that? Because the committee has just been formed, and you've got to start it, and we do have legal counsel that we have engaged in on, that we use as a municipality. And so seems to me we might be jumping the gun a little bit on that.
One of my reasons for this, and Steph, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we don't have another meeting till September. I know we definitely don't have one in August, but I don't think we have one on the books for July. So that's my only thing, is that if we don't get this resolution and approval of these fees today, then it's 3 months. And I think this is something we know in the next 3 months that we'd like to have that advice, because it's going to be pretty critical in this. I don't know if anybody else.
So I would like to, can I just say that it looks like the acronym will be COHO, which is really cute.
What is that?
Community Owned Housing Organization, COHO.
Oh, okay.
I did want to touch base with Daniel on like what we have on retainer for legal advice, and to what extent we would need to go through staff to access legal channels. I expect you're trying to create budget as like you wouldn't be working with lawyers without staff involvement. Daniel, am I correct in having that concern?
I would think so, I guess, if it's like legal advice that we want the municipality to rely on, I guess.
Yeah.
At least somewhat involved in that.
Yeah.
And like receiving that opinion.
Yeah. So if they want budget created for that, legal advice to go through staff, is there already budget in another like housing related something in your department, or also what about who we have on retainer? Or
like I have a legal, like the planning department has a legal budget that we use, and I guess maybe it would just be like council direction like associated with this strategic item.
Okay, so maybe the recommendation would say that the housing committee recommends that councils allows COHO to access.
Well, it's more like the working group, I guess, right?
COHO working group, the community owned housing organization working group, to access up to $2,000 of legal advice.
Yeah.
Via
From the planning
department.
budget?
Or could it be something like work with staff to do that, and then it's just clear.
Work with staff to, what's a nice verb for the to ensure, or
no, it's like to obtain a legal opinion or obtain legal advice.
Obtain legal advice. To work with staff to obtain legal advice. Up to $2,000.
At a cost not to exceed.
Thank you. Oh, yes. Okay. Sorry, Robin. I just need to be clear on what these processes.
Oh yeah, no, that's okay. This is new to me as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
We've never had a budget. We've never had money in this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The Housing Advisory Committee recommend that the council allow the community-owned housing organization working group to work with BIM planning staff to obtain legal advice at a cost not to exceed $2,000. Can I just say to support recommendations?
Proposed recommendation.
To support proposed recommendations in the working group deliverable or in the final report.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think that gets the idea across.
Because it is people, they don't, trust me, they don't like committees having money. So if you need to go through the proper ways to get there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So do we then we like move that and second it and vote? Is that the yeah? Okay. So do we have somebody to move that?
I'll move it.
Okay, thank you. The second. Thank you, Nigel. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that looks good.
Any
Fritz,
opposed?
are you?
I'm
Your
almost
eye,
done,
Fritz?
so. It's my
Okay,
last
any? Oh, thank you. Any opposed? Okay, Councillor
I
Morris.
think it's premature.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all I had on my list for our report. Maybe Tim, Ron, did you have any comments on that one before we move along?
Just to Councillor Morris's comment, a big part of exploring this is going to be to get some sense of what the options are and what the cost would be. And I don't think we can make a decision about whether or not we're going to form it without some understanding of what it would be. So that's why I think this is worthwhile.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. So item 5.2 on the agenda, Housing Reserve Fund Working Group. So I'll hand it over to Nigel.
Okay.
Did you have an update for us? Yeah.
I do. So since our last meeting, Councillor Wake and Lois and I met with Daniel just to sort of do a deep dive on what might be possible, really related to what Daniel shared with us in depth in our last HAC meeting. And I'll sort of boil it down to a 1, 2, 3, and then I think I may turn it over to Councillor Wake and Daniel to offer a little more detail on their areas of expertise. But the 3 key areas that we're talking about so far, there's the obvious one, which is just traditional fundraising campaigns. And a tangent of that I don't think we've seen done before, but we would like to add to the list would be to include the idea of promoting the idea that people think about in their estate planning, leaving a bit to the community housing organization. Councillor Wake brought to the table some really great ideas and relationships around impact investing, which I'll ask him to share after I'm done. And then the last one, which is quite complex, it's the idea of the municipality participating in the profits that are created when the municipality allows new forms of density that aren't presently available under the current zoning. And the idea here is let's create incentives for landowners. So when I say developer, it's a classic developer that's building homes for profit, but it's also a lot of landowners on Bowen that have a lot more land than they need and might like to unlock a bit of equity. And the idea is we want to create policies in the bylaw and the OCP revisions that make it possible for the municipality to say, hey, if you're going to make X dollars by us authorizing this development, we're going to participate in that this much, and that might take the form of creating affordable housing. It might also take the form of cash in lieu. And it sounds to me, based on the really deep dive that Daniel's done, that there's a lot of complexity to that because of the new provincial regulation. It creates some new obstacles. It creates some new opportunities. And it sounds like if we focus on the positive side, the new opportunities, it's really important that that we as the Housing Advisory Committee are working in perfect conjunction with the OCP Review Committee and with the Planning Department so that the new bylaws and the updated OCP make it possible when that all comes together to have a mayor and council that's really enabled to create or enact bylaws that are supported by the OCP that let our municipality participate in those profits and funnel a lot of it towards the housing authority or the housing authority. So I think maybe I'll just turn it over first to Councillor Wake and then to Daniel to just sort of offer maybe a little bit whatever you guys want to share. So over to you, Councillor Wake.
Well, it was a very good meeting with Daniel, and there is a lot of detail, and we're going to rely on Daniel to help us work through this. But looking high level, I think what's really exciting is that we're opening up more ways, basically, to create housing and affordable housing. And there were two takeaways for me. One was in a situation where we're looking at what the provincial legislation allows us to do. And Daniel, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but if we're building non-market housing, it just removes a bunch of barriers. And whereas if we're doing market housing, which we should be doing and would probably be what we've talked about in terms of cluster housing and use of large parts of large lots by owners who would like to, as you say, Nigel, pull some equity out. That might be more market housing, and hopefully we can get it to be affordable by keeping this unit size down and focusing on affordability. But where we're doing non-market housing, it would apply to bigger projects, perhaps, which would be 100% affordable housing or a large percentage of it, and where the opportunity there is both to get funding through a housing organization, which I think is why we absolutely need one. And some of that funding could come through the housing fund. Some of it could come from impact investment, which is basically, there are a number of funds now where the investors are focusing on non-market housing projects, and they're more concerned with the impact return rather than the financial return. So we're basically, to simplify it, we're talking about loans in the order of 3% interest if the criteria is met that it's going to be non-market housing. And then there also having a housing organization in place allows us to apply and access CMHC and BC housing funding. So all this to say is I think there's some really good opportunities opening up, but we need to have a housing organization in order to realize those.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Wake. Daniel, do you feel like weighing in on the opportunities and the challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think I prepared something to talk about Bill 16 like later in this agenda.
Oh, we can do that.
So I don't know if we want to jump to that now, or I can talk about it after when we get to there, but
we can wait.
But yeah, I think I would agree in terms
if
of
it's relevant. Go ahead, Dan. If you think it's relevant, I'm happy to jump to that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm worried about this just boring people, but I have slides on Bill 16. So this is kind of what we went over with the with Nigel's subcommittee. And it's just these sort of opportunities that are in Bill 16, and is I think Nigel and Tim have both said like opportunities and challenges, both combined. So this is a new bill this spring, is called Bill 16, Housing Statutes Amendment Act. And it includes provisions for both what it calls density benefit zoning and inclusionary zoning. So density benefit zoning is often called like density bonusing. And it currently, prior to Bill 16, it existed in the Local Government Act, but very sort of loose. It just says you can have a zoning bylaw that has different density rules for a zone, one generally applicable and one if you've met certain conditions. And conditions can be, affordable special needs housing, or it can just be about amenities. So this is an example of like what a typical density bonus bylaw might look like. This is District of Souk. And it just says in multifamily areas, if you place 80% of the parking spaces underground, you can build more units per hectare and you can build higher and you can build more lot coverage. If you provide, if you provide canopies on the building, you can increase your lot coverage. So it's a way of saying, like, if you do what we want to do, you can build more. It says if you're building an assisted living facility, you can increase your lot coverage. We have one example of it in our land use bylaw. So this was done recently. The Housing Advisory Committee helped recommend this. And I put Bill 562, but this is bylaw 562, the Arbutus Ridge zone, where we provide additional floor area in area 4 of this CD zone if you have an accessory residential use. So this is density bonus. We want to encourage you to build secondary suites. If you build a secondary suite, you get additional floor area in the zone. What Bill 16 does essentially is it amplifies that section on affordable housing. So it no longer just says, you can include additional benefits for providing affordable housing, but it says you have to be much more specific than you did before. So it's saying now if you have conditions about section 2B, which is about providing affordable special needs housing, you must have conditions about the required portion of affordable and special needs housing, the form of tenure, the affordability of the units, the length of time that they're subject to those conditions. You need to specify things like the proportion of all housing units in a development, percentage of the gross floor area of the residential component of the development. So you can't just say, you provide suites, but it needs to be a little more specified. And it says you may then have an option where the developer can instead pay money instead of meeting those conditions. And it says you must do a financial feasibility analysis before adopting or amending a bylaw for that. And then there are conditions. It says instead of meeting the conditions, you can provide money. It's money that's equal to the estimated capital costs that the developer would otherwise incur to meet the conditions imposed under this section. And then it says the method for determining the estimated capital costs must be specified in the density benefit zoning bylaw. And then there's an ability to meet the density benefit zoning bylaw by providing the affordable housing units somewhere else under a different parcel of land. So all of this means it sort of gives details on what local governments have to consider. So some of the takeaways is it does make it more complex to do this type of bylaw. So whereas before for the Arbutus Ridge development density benefit, we could just put it in the bylaw. We say, this makes sense. This is something we want to encourage. We're going to allow additional floor area. Whereas under Bill 16, we would have to have done a fair bit more work beforehand to do it. But maybe it provides more clarity in terms of what our power to do that is. And then Bill 16 has a section on what's commonly called inclusionary zoning, although it's called something else in the bill. But inclusionary zoning essentially is a policy or a bylaw where local governments require a specified percentage of units in a new residential development be allocated for uses like affordable housing. So an example of this is actually our affordable housing policy, where it's a policy that applies at rezoning, but this provision in it that 15% of the floor area of a development be affordable housing is a form of inclusionary zoning policy. So Bill 16 calls it zoning bylaws and affordable special needs housing. So it says the zoning bylaw may require developments within a zone to include the portion of affordable and special needs housing units that's specified in the zoning bylaw. And it can have requirements about things like the ownership and management of the units, the number of bedrooms in the units. It can provide higher density developments that are subject to the requirements. And as an alternative, it can provide this cash in lieu option as well. So you could conceivably have a zone that said, this zone can have 40 units in, but X number of them have to be rental units. Or X number have to be 3-bedroom units. We're worried about too many single-bedroom units being developed in our community. We need some more family housing, or whatever the case may be. Right, because then it must establish regulations about the tenure of the housing, the affordability of the units, the length of time that they're subject to the requirements. So again, you could have a zone that says 40 units, 10 of them have to be rental, they have to be rented. They're subject to that rental requirement for 60 years. And they can only rent at this maximum rate. But before adopting a bylaw, a local government has to have, again, a financial feasibility analysis undertaken. They need to consider the most recent housing needs report, and they need to consider, an important one, consider whether the zoning bylaw would deter development. So a local government couldn't take a privately owned parcel and say, okay, you can do 10 units, but they all have to be rental. They can't be rent for more than X amount a month. If then you do financial feasibility analysis and it says, well, nobody will build it. Like you're essentially saying you can't build anything. If you'd only build under these conditions and analysis says this is just not profitable, like somebody would lose money to build this, then that bylaw, you can't do that by bylaw. So it talks about the feasibility analysis has to include certain things like conditions of the local housing market, the costs of construction, essentially the feasibility of meeting the requirements. So again, are these reasonable requirements? And then similar to the density bonusing, it has provisions where you can instead provide cash in lieu. And it has to be the amount of the estimated capital costs that the developer would otherwise incur. So that is what is in the bill. And I know, Nigel, when I met with your subcommittee, we sort of talked about, what would the cases be for doing this? Like, how would this work in practice? And I know in terms of the inclusionary zoning, like I've thought about it, like currently our policy has this sort of inclusionary zoning provision in it that we do at time of rezoning. And we know under other provincial legislation, when the new OCP is adopted, that shows 20 years of projected housing need, we will have to update the zoning bylaw to also match that. So it's conceivable that through the OCP review and the housing need, that say there could be a large parcel somewhere on Bowen that through the OCP review has said, okay, currently, this is one parcel or this is two parcels, but in our OCP, we see potential for this to be a larger development. But we want to ensure that parts of it are affordable, say. So it's conceivable then the OCP would say, okay, this really large area could be 20 units, could be 40 units, could be something more. And then when we do a zoning bylaw to update it, that zoning bylaw could say, okay, it could be 20 units, but whatever the number is, 5 of them, 10 of them have to be rented. They have to be rented under this formula or something like that, where we're having to pre-zone, but we're trying to capture some of those elements of the affordable housing policy in that development as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Daniel.
So I don't know, everyone, go for it, Robin.
Well, I just had a question. So is there any timeline that we have to address these? Because it's like, or are they, it's because we have our own policy already. These are coming down from the province. Yeah. Is it, because I know with other recent ones like the OCP and everything, we've kind of been forced to a timeline to change things. Is there anything like that in this, or is it just more we have to, if we make changes or when we incorporate those or at least meet those standards?
Yes, these are, both of these provisions, like the density bonusing and the inclusionary, are may. So these are essentially provided as tools for local governments to use. And where I have in my head is like when we really want to be considering them is then when we have to update the zoning bylaw to match the OCP. It's like, oh, that's the opportunity. Like that's sort of we're not forced to, but that would be an opportunity to say if the result of the OCP review is, larger number of additional units permitted on Bowen, it's maybe a time to consider should that large number of units come with some sort of affordability requirements.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks for that. Councillor Morris?
Just thinking back to the original housing bill, I thought there was something in there that everybody was objecting to that caused this revision in Bill 16, that there was no way we could require cash in lieu or anything in the way of, because everybody was saying, because they've got this other new bylaw you're supposed to get for, for the goodies, I'll call it. And we couldn't require affordable housing or anything else as a goodie. So that's why they put in this inclusionary zoning thing in Bill 16. So
Yes, I think so. So like the province brought this bylaw for amenity cost charges that we can charge at rezoning or even building permit stage, and says you can charge for these like DCCs, and affordable housing wasn't on the list. So yeah, this is like essentially a different approach the province is taking for affordable housing as a way to have affordable housing requirements in your bylaw. The thing that I haven't sort of fully grasped or figured out, and we talked about this with Nigel's group, is this idea that like when it talks about you need to pay cash in lieu, that it has to be equal to the estimated capital costs, and how, you know, sort of large that could be. Like we talked about the density bonusing provision. Like you could imagine a density bonusing provision where we said, okay, on rural lots, which are larger, you can have an additional, you know, secondary dwelling unit. So I guess a tertiary dwelling unit, but it has to be rented, and it has to be rented at no more than this amount. Okay, so we say that's great. And then we could say, well, but there's a cash in lieu. Instead of meeting that requirement, you could provide this amount of money to our affordable housing fund, and maybe you could build it without those requirements. But as I sort of initially read the bill, it's saying, well, you'd have to pay the equivalent estimated capital cost. So that means, you know, to build your additional detached secondary suite without rental requirements on it, you'd have to pay us, to our affordable housing fund, the cost of building it, and then you would have to build it. It's like, well, I don't see that people would do that. That seems excessive. So I don't know, there's avenue instead. Like, could somebody argue that, well, no, it's the cost of, you know, the incremental cost of me making it available as rental, as opposed to just whatever I want it to be. I don't know, but it does say, you know, the estimated capital costs.
Yeah.
So,
but at this point, if I'm understanding the original legislation, there's no way for us to get something from a developer without having that amenity contributions bylaw or going through this inclusionary zoning bylaw. So they come for a rezoning, it matches the OCP, they can do it. And we can't ask them for any goodies, cash or anything else, unless we've got the amenity zoning, the amenity contributions bylaw, or the this new Bill 16. So I guess what I'm saying is we can't require a 15%.
well, I think that's where I would say the opportunity is in doing that zoning bylaw to match the OCP.
Yeah.
Like if our new OCP says these areas are areas for density, but then the policies are, but we want to see a mix of affordable housing in those areas.
Yeah.
And then when we do the zoning bylaw to update it, not as an individual rezoning, but it's like a mandated requirement to have our zoning bylaw match our OCP, that it could be saying in those areas, you have to provide this mix of units that the OCP calls for, and the zoning would then be matching the OCP, but would have some of these requirements, and that I guess then the people would have the option to buy their way out of whatever that looks like.
Yeah. Anyhow, it's all going to have to wait and unravel as the OCP gets redone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Or I guess conceivably, Councillor Morse, like if somebody then, we do the OCP, we do the zoning, but somebody still has an idea for a one-off application that would amend the OCP in a location. So the OCP says they could be 4, and they say, we want to do 8. And we would say, okay, well, we'll consider it, but maybe your actual zoning bylaw is going to look like an inclusionary zoning bylaw.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks, Daniel. Any other questions or discussion on either the Bill 16 that Daniel presented, or back to where we were with the Housing Reserve Fund Working Group, what Nigel was talking about? Any other questions or discussion before we move along? Oh, Fritz, I think we can't hear you. You're on mute.
There we go. Like, okay, like to which degree is the province able to enforce these things? Like, because it seems to be really difficult.
I mean, I think probably they would say that the risk then is like if we did a bylaw that didn't follow what's required in Bill 16, that then the private landowner would take the municipality to court and have the bylaw declared invalid. So the province is saying this is a tool that you can use. And if we did an inclusionary zoning bylaw for a property and said, you need to do these things, and then the owner thought, you're now like, restricting me from all development because your bylaw is so onerous, that they would challenge the bylaw and say, the municipality didn't follow the requirements in Bill 16 and didn't consider these things that you had to consider. Therefore, your bylaw is invalid. I don't have to follow the requirements. I'll just build my market housing. Thank you very much.
But does the province do some kind of an audit or so, or is it just like in trust that the municipality will stick to all the regulations?
Yeah, like they don't have, it doesn't have the requirements like for a DCC bylaw where the province has to sign off on your bylaw. So it doesn't seem to do that. It's more just saying these are things you have to do, and then they're in essence leaving it up to like the court to determine, I would think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think, Fritz, you have to sign off, don't you?
Yeah, I will.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you very much, Fritz.
Thanks,
it's been
Fritz.
a pleasure
Yeah,
working with you.
Fritz.
Thanks for all your work on this committee.
I'm sure I will meet you in a whole bunch of meetings anyway. So.
Absolutely. We'll see you again for sure.
Okay,
Thank
cheers.
you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay. Bye. So I'll move on to 6.1, which is updates on a couple of projects that are happening. I don't have too much of an update. The Birch Housing Project at 1033 Miller Road. We're just having a couple of startup meetings, and I think the biggest update is I've been liaising with the municipality about the lease and how the lease is going to work with Lookout. So we should have an update on that. Certainly by next meeting, because if we're not meeting in a couple of months, I should have a lot more to update. There hasn't been too much in the last month. And then the Lot 3 project, same, we've just been going through our engagement. So we had the survey, we got, I think over 50, I think it was in the 50s, 53 respondents, which, not fantastic, but not bad to have 50 people respond to our survey. Yeah.
Robin, you said Lot 3. I think you meant Lot 1.
Oh, what did I say? Oh, sorry, it's typo in the agenda. I'm looking at the agenda. You're correct. Thank you. Lot 1, the project with Tomo. And so, yeah, we had the survey. We had a small engagement group. We got several people respond. And then in the end, only a handful came to our engagement group. But it was a nice discussion. And then, yeah, we're planning to present to council, but we haven't had the date confirmed. So I'm thinking it looks like it's going to be in July that we'll be presenting to council, our sort of work in progress and where we're up to. Councillor Morris.
Just a curiosity question, clarification. So the Tomo will be entering into the lease with the municipality for the land?
Oh, sorry, I'm mixing everything up and talking about them together. So for the Miller Road Lot 3, I believe, I'm sorry, I can't remember procedurally where we're up to, but what we've suggested to council or to the municipality is that Lookout, who's going to be the lead person on the project, and they're going to own and operate. Yeah, they're going to own and operate the building. Is that the first step is the municipality enter into a lease with Lookout. So that's the way moving forward. It's just the most expeditious way of moving this along, because we want to try to get that resolved in the next few months, so that we can have that. The funders obviously want to see that the land has security.
Yeah.
So
well, no, that was I assumed that was going to happen, but I wanted to just clarify. And and they're going to build the building as designed when we saw them at the DVP. So no changes.
No significant changes have been talked about. We're just getting back into the design. So there will be changes based on the updated building code that just changed in March. And then we'll obviously have to reassess if there's any additional requirements with funding from the federal level, because we designed it to meet what previously was required with the what was called the co-investment fund and the BC housing requirements. And then I'm not the expert in it. I believe that maybe those requirements, we have to assess that if those requirements have changed from the federal level CMHC funding. So it might just be some tweaking, but we're certainly at this point, no major redesign is proposed.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Daniel.
I was just going to flag then too. There's a notice of motion on the June 10th council agenda about the lease.
The lease.
And
okay.
then it would be considered at the June 24th meeting. And that motion is to direct staff to prepare agreement to lease the land to Lookout Housing and Health Society to consider at the July 8th, 2024 meeting. And then, followed with a long-term lease later in 2024. So
yeah, great. Thanks, Daniel. Yeah. So we're excited about that. That's moving forward. And like I say, with Tomo on lot 1, we're chipping away at it, and we'll have an update in July for council. And then we're planning a bit more engagement at the end of the summer. And and then our final report at the end of the year. So any further questions about the lot 3 project on Miller Road with Lookout, or the lot 1 project with Tomo? Yeah. Okay, hearing none, we will move along. I think we might even wrap up early today. So we've already done 7.1, Bill 16. And is there any other business from anybody?
So we've got a next meeting date of July 5th on here. Are you saying that's not happening?
Oh, I think, well, there's a question mark. So thanks.
I don't know why the question mark was there. I think I had June. I've got July 5th in the calendar, and the next one is September 13th.
Okay, yeah, sorry, it's just not in my calendar. So maybe it's just that I haven't put it in. So the July 5th works for me because I think our usual date.
Oh, sorry, it's not in your calendar. It's in mine with a question mark. That's what I'm suggesting.
Okay, yeah, because the 12th, which I think might have been our usual date, doesn't work for me. I can't remember what it is. So anyways, July 5th, how does that sound for everybody?
That works
so
for
we
me.
can have another meeting.
Fine
That's
for
great.
me.
Yeah, seeing a thumbs up. Okay, so it looks like it works for the majority. So let's do that, and hopefully all or most can make it. So that's great. I didn't think we'd have another chance. So that's great. So July 5th, we'll meet, and then we'll skip August, and then we'll be back in September, which I think we already have those dates booked in. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your time, and thanks for everybody on the committees and working groups and joining from cars. And okay, we'll see you in July. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.